in Ethiopia. Once a prominent activist and media star, he now lives in exile in Kenya. While he continues to see himself as an activist, his past actions and continued influence on Ethiopian politics have sparked debate. His story raises important questions about responsibility, representation, and the true meaning of fighting for the people. Jawar's journey began in Ethiopia, where he became a leading voice in the Oromo protest movement. He advocated for the rights of the Oromo and other marginalized groups, demanding language rights, academic freedom, and self-determination. His activism, including his role in the protests against the Addis Ababa Master Plan in 2014, earned him both admiration and criticism. After years of living in exile and running the Oromia media network from the United States, Jawar returned to Ethiopia in 2018. His return, celebrated by supporters as a victory for the Oromo people, marked a turning point in Ethiopian politics. Jawar's influence, amplified by his skillful use of social media, contributed to the resignation of Prime Minister Haile Mariam Desalegn and paved the way for Abiy Ahmed to take power. The relationship between Jawar and the Ethiopian government quickly deteriorated. Following a wave of violence in 2020 that claimed hundreds of lives, he was arrested. Although he was eventually released after a year in prison, the incident further damaged his reputation and intensified concerns about his role in exacerbating ethnic tensions. Jawar's early activism focused on addressing the grievances of the Oromo people who had long experienced marginalization and discrimination in Ethiopia. He used his platform to draw attention to human rights violations, advocate for greater political representation, and challenge government policies. His efforts resonated with many, especially young people, who saw him as a champion for their rights. With the Oromia Media Network, Jawar provided a platform for Oromo voices and perspectives, challenging the government's narrative and offering an alternative view of events. His use of social media allowed him to bypass traditional media and connect directly with a large audience in Ethiopia and the diaspora. Jawar's return to Ethiopia in 2018 was met with great joy. He was seen as a symbol of hope and change, a leader who could usher in a new era of democracy and equality. His presence energized the opposition movement and put pressure on the government to address the protesters' demands. Despite his initial popularity, Jawar's actions and rhetoric became increasingly divisive. His critics accused him of inciting violence, exploiting ethnic tensions for political gain, and undermining the Abiy government's efforts at unity and reconciliation. Jawar Mohammed's legacy in Ethiopia is complex and controversial. His supporters see him as a courageous advocate for justice and equality, a leader who challenged the status quo and amplified the voices of the marginalized. They credit him with playing a crucial role in bringing about political change and creating space for greater freedom of expression. Jawar's critics, on the other hand, argue that his actions had a destabilizing effect on Ethiopian society. They point to his inflammatory rhetoric, his alleged role in inciting violence, and his tendency to exploit ethnic divisions. They argue that his pursuit of power came at the expense of national unity and stability. While Jawar's activism initially focused on addressing legitimate grievances, his methods and goals changed over time. His critics accuse him of being more interested in advancing his own political ambitions than in serving the interests of the people he claimed to represent. They accuse him of opportunism and hypocrisy and point to his shift from advocating for unity and reconciliation to embracing a more divisive ethnic nationalism. Of particular concern is the impact of Jawar's actions on Ethiopia's poorer populations. While he often spoke in their name, his critics argue that his rhetoric and actions exacerbated existing inequalities and made it more difficult to address the root causes of poverty and marginalization. The case of Jawar Mohammed raises important questions about the nature of political representation and the responsibility of leaders to act in the best interests of their constituents. While he portrayed himself as a champion of the people, his actions often contradicted his words, raising doubts about his true motives and his commitment to those most in need. Jawar's continued attempts to influence Ethiopian politics from exile raise further questions about his legitimacy and accountability. His physical distance from the country and the challenges it faces cast doubt on his ability to truly understand and represent the needs of the Ethiopian people. Ethiopia needs leaders who are deeply connected to the realities on the ground, who understand the daily struggles of ordinary people, and who are committed to finding solutions that benefit all citizens, regardless of their ethnicity or background. These leaders must prioritize dialogue, compromise, and the pursuit of the common good over narrow political agendas. The challenges facing Ethiopia are complex and multifaceted, requiring nuanced solutions and a willingness to work together across political and ethnic divides. It is time for a new generation of leaders to emerge, committed to building a more just, equitable, and prosperous Ethiopia for all.